Hello everybody, this is Brett Lonsdale from Lightning Tools and welcome to the session today on Lightning Forms. And what we're going to do is have a little bit of fun with Lightning Forms today and build out a very seasonal Christmas wish list using some SharePoint lists and the Lightning Forms tool. So before we get into that, just a quick introduction as to who we are. So Lightning Tools is a SharePoint only company. We've been providing SharePoint tools now for the last 12 years in lots of different areas such as business data connectivity, also discussion forums, permissions management, content aggregation, data visualization, and of course the Lightning Forms, which is the product that we're going to be taking a look at today. So my name is Brett Lonsdale. I'm a SharePoint MVP, and I've been specializing in SharePoint for quite some time now, ever since around about 2003. I've written some books, contributed to other books as well, and also I'm one of the hosts on a pod show called Techsplaining. So you can go to techsplaining.net and listen to a number of different pod shows that we've been recording around Microsoft Office 365 and SharePoint as well. Over on the left here, you'll find my Twitter handle, also my LinkedIn address. So if you do use those channels, feel free to get in touch and follow me and so on. We'll be dropping out some stuff from time to time on there. So yeah, Lightning Tools, as I mentioned, we've been around for about 12 years. We've got a UK based office, which is our HQ, and we've also got a office in the US as well, which is based in Orlando. We pride ourselves on being innovative, building simple to use products that perform, and also backed with knowledgeable, outstanding staff that can help resolve technical issues should you come across any, and also provide you with outstanding customer service. And that's sort of reflected in the fact that we've got the RENCORE certification for our code quality in our products, and also the fact that we're a Microsoft Gold certified partner as well. So what we're going to be taking a look at today is Lightning Forms, as I mentioned. So what we're going to be doing here is using Lightning Forms to go through and take some SharePoint lists and customize the existing forms that we have inside those SharePoint lists, such as the new form, the display form, and the edit form. And the reason why we'll be editing those forms is to add some business logic to those forms so that they become more than just a series of fields that you might get in some of the things like task lists and contact lists and so on, but also give you the ability to add logic to some custom lists. So maybe you've gone through and created some custom content types around a specific business need inside your organization, and there's certain things that you want to do with that form. Maybe you want to change the layout of the fields to use tabs, or to use expanding, collapsing sections such as accordions, or also add validation, add different types of calculations, hide fields based on certain conditions, and so on. This is all the sort of thing that you can do with Lightning Forms very easily. And more importantly, you don't have to be technical to do it. So you can be a business user. You've got a specific need with inside your department to add some logic to one of your lists, and if that's the case, then you can use Lightning Forms to do just that. You don't need to get to know any formula language either, because most of that is really intuitive through Lightning Forms, which you'll see as we go through it. Also point out that one of the things that we're going to be launching very, very soon in partnership with Skybo is a tool that is going to help you migrate your InfoPath forms across to Lightning Forms. So if you've already been using InfoPath forms, then we can bring those across to Lightning Forms. You can take your existing layout and logic that you've added into your InfoPath forms into a SharePoint list and use the same form technology there. So that's something to keep an eye out for. If you haven't done already, it's a good idea to join our newsletter so that you can be notified about that once that's available. So, yeah, this is almost my last slide because a lot of what we're going to be doing is going to be a demonstration. So just to sort of highlight some of the features that we're going to be talking about in Lightning Forms. First of all, we've got this nice drag and drop design interface, and that's quite important. If you look at some form technologies, you're not within the context of the form that you're trying to design. So it might even be a separate application to SharePoint that you're using to try and design a user interface. And then, of course, once it's in SharePoint, it's not what you imagined. So one of the things that we have with Lightning Forms is effectively a WYSIWYG editor. I do feel really old when I say WYSIWYG, but we do have really a WYSIWYG editor, so you can go into a form, customize it. You can drag the fields around into the order that you want them to be in, and what you end up with in the designer is exactly how it's going to look and feel once you save those changes. So you can categorize the different controls as well with groups or with tabs. We can also work with sublists. So if you imagine the kind of scenario where you've got effectively a one-to-many type join, although it's not a relational database, you've got perhaps two lists that are working as one solution through a lookup field, then what we can do is actually display that information on the one form. So you can take, for example, some contacts and display the orders for those contacts, or customers and orders, or something like that. Or maybe an expense report header with expense details on the same form. So that makes it a lot easier for your end users to fill out these forms. They're not having to go to multiple lists in order to do so. You can also show and hide fields on the form. So this could be based on SharePoint group membership, so i.e. permissions. So if you wanted to maybe hide a particular field from showing up from any user other than those that are a member of a certain SharePoint group, then we can do that. But you can also hide these fields based on other conditions as well. So maybe depending on what you choose in a drop-down list may affect whether another field is shown or hidden. We can do cascading lookups, so that enables your users to fill out the forms more quickly. We've got calculated fields that you can add, not just standard calculations that you can do in SharePoint lists anyway, but also calculations that can bring back results from a sublist or also work with inside a sublist as well, which we'll be taking a look at. And of course, we've got validation, which goes without saying, and that's client-side validation. And we have button actions. So you can go through and create your own buttons that live on these forms and add a list of actions that button is going to do. So effectively, we're building a sort of simple workflow here where you could go through and maybe write to a history list. You can send emails. You can populate field values and all sorts of things using the button actions all strung together in order in behind a button. And we've got the same sort of thing for the form load as well. So as the form loads, we can trigger all sorts of things to occur as a result. So I already mentioned, we integrate with things like SharePoint groups for showing and hiding fields. And we've also got the ability to work with Business Connectivity Services external lists as well. And of course, this is a space that Lightning Tools has always been in. So connecting to external data sources such as SQL and Oracle, and being able to bring that data in really easily into an external list. It's quite important that when your users are creating items inside an external list, that you're validating the data that is going to go into a live relational database. And actually, that's one of the reasons why many people make their external lists read-only, because they want to have some control over how that data is going to be input into a relational database, and they don't because you can't customize those forms using SharePoint. But with Lightning Forms, you can. So you can take an external list and add some validation or change the layout and, like I say, the logic as well on that form. So I hope that just sort of describes the sort of things that you can use the tool for. And now we're just going to jump in and start playing around with the product so you can see how it's used. So just bear with me a moment whilst I Alt Tab into the site. So I'm using SharePoint Online here, but this is not just a SharePoint Online tool. It's the same product that you can use in both SharePoint on-premises or SharePoint Online. It does require that you have the app catalog in place because it is a SharePoint add-in. So if you are using SharePoint 2013 or SharePoint 2016, you will need to provision your app catalog, and you can go through and add the add-in then. And then once you're in place with all of that, you can add the app to the app catalog, and users can start adding it onto a page or into a site where they want to start customizing their SharePoint lists. So Here we are, like I say, in a SharePoint team site, and what I'm going to do is just navigate to the site contents and introduce to you the first list that we're going to be working with, and that is this Christmas list here. So, we're about probably 6 weeks out of Christmas, so we need to start thinking what we're going to buy people. I'm male, so we need to start thinking about what we're going to buy people, but we'll actually go and buy the things on Christmas Eve. Yeah, we could start putting a list together, so we know what we're going to buy our children, buy our husbands and wives or parents or whatever. So actually this Christmas list is starting off with just a standard contacts list, and I've added just a few extra fields to it that you'll see. This is uncustomized at the moment. When I click onto new item, you'll probably recognize this. This is a bog standard contact list. And as I scroll down here, these are just the additional fields that I added that are going to be useful for this demonstration. And that is the relationship type to the person that I'm buying for. So are they family or are they non-family? And if they're family, then what I want to do is actually show family members type relationships in here. So yeah, whether it's son, wife, mother, husband, etc. If it's non-family, then what I want to do here is just show some of the other people, such as colleague, enemy, and you can buy for enemies, and also friends and so on. But we want that list to effectively cascade, filter out the options based on the relationship type that is selected here. So this is the sort of thing that we're going to do. We're going to change the layout and make this form generally a little bit easier to use rather than just having this great big long list of fields. So how we can go about that, if I just hit cancel for a moment, one way is to just jump up here onto the list ribbon, and you'll notice that we've then got the customize lightning forms button. If you are using modern lists, you can still customize those. You can actually just jump into the app. So as I go into lightning forms here, it will show me all of the different SharePoint lists and libraries that are within inside the site. So if I don't have the ribbon, in other words, we can go to all the lists here, and you can see we've got the new display, edit, form, and more forms. So you can actually add more forms to a list if you want to. And in order to customize those, you can basically just click onto the icon. And once it has been customized, it will stay in bold. So you'll be able to tell which forms in which lists you customized and which ones you didn't. So two ways of doing it: either launch it from the ribbon or launch it from here. So let's just launch this one from here. So on the Christmas list, I want to start customizing the new form, so I can click onto that, and that will launch the designer, so I can start adding the logic to that form there. So yeah, the form's now in design mode. So like you can see, it looks exactly the same. It's just got the grid lines and everything to help me position the fields and so on. And like I say, we're working within the context of the form. So we're going to start going through these two different tabs. The first one is the Rich Forms tab, and that gives me the ability to save and revert back to previous versions and things like that. We'll have a look at that in just a moment. We've also got the ability to add additional fields and group fields together. That's something that we can do on the Rich Forms tab, as well as adding action buttons and sublists and things like that. And then the rest of this is really about positioning those fields on the form, maybe changing the status of those fields, whether they're read-only or not. You can change the layout of the labels and things. We're going to be doing all of that. On the behavior tab, this is all to do with the logic behind the fields on the form, or also the form load actions and so on as well. I did zoom in, so that's wrapped the ribbon a little bit. Just for the demonstration purposes. So when I'm talking about the control status, I'll zoom back out for a moment so that you can see that as it's intended. So first of all, on the Rich Forms tab, so like I said, we can save, obviously. So you can click that save icon. That will save the changes. But what you'll also see is every time you save, a new version is created. So I'm currently working on version 1 of the form. Every time I hit the save icon, it's going to create version 2, version 3, and so on. So if we make a mistake, if we accidentally delete a field or whatever we do, we can always revert back to a previously saved version, just like we'd be able to if we were using a standard document inside SharePoint. You can also reset back to default, which will basically undo all of your changes, but still use Lightning Forms. So you're just undoing all the changes it put back to how the list was originally. Or you can uncustomize the form, which means take Lightning Forms out of it. I just want the list as it was without Lightning Forms installed. So there's a few different options that you've got there. Then we can start working with the fields. And these are all the fields that make up the list that I'm within at the moment. And if I wanted to add one of those fields onto the page, then I can just go through and add it. So for example, if I get rid of this web page section, I don't particularly need that on there. And then I decide that I want to add it back again. I can just come down to web page and drop it on the form here and drag it and drop it to where I'd like that field to appear. So it's really simple to work with the existing fields, and it's also simple to go through and add new fields. So as I'm designing my form, sometimes you think, oh, I needed a total column or something like that. Now we don't necessarily want you to have to save the form, navigate back out of it, go into the list, create a new column, and then come back into the designer again. So you can just simply go through and add a new column right here. So I can just call this new column. Just for fun, we'll choose single line of text or whatever. And this is all standard SharePoint stuff. When I click onto OK, the field's created and added to my form already. So there's no sort of back in and forth going to the standard SharePoint list settings. So I'm just going to remove that one again. Okay, so that's the field, and then we've got the grouping. So different types of groups. You can have vertical groups and horizontal groups, groups with headers. So these are basically expand collapse sections. So you can hide some of the fields that aren't necessarily required all of the time, only maybe used occasionally. So you could hide those within an expand collapse section. You could also use tables and tabs as well for your layout. And I'm going to use some tabs in a moment to control the layout of my form. We've also got a toolbar, so you can go through and add your own buttons onto the toolbar, and we've got a rich text box as well. And I'm going to start off with that. So what I'm going to do is actually just select a field at the top of my form, click onto the rich text box, position that where I want that to appear. And this rich text box we can make as big or as small as we want. And within there we can type or insert whatever we like. So these are useful for headers onto the form, or they can also be used if you wanted to add sort of instructional information on how to complete the form or something like that. Basically, you can just type, format, insert things. So on here, I'm just going to go to the insert ribbon, and since this is a Christmas type theme, what I'm going to do is go through and choose a file here, and we've got a sort of Christmas heading that I'm going to drop on, which will go and live in site assets. So we've got that, and of course we could go through and position that where we want that to be positioned on my form. Okay, so that's the rich text. We could also just type. So if we wanted to type in here, whatever, we can do that. And then you've got all of the different heading formats that you can do, and so on. So then I want to categorize some of these fields because there's just too many fields in one list. So I'm going to use the tabs for that. So I'm going to click onto tabs here. Notice I get this nice tab control. We can drag that again up or down wherever we want that to appear. And we've got our first tab. I'm just going to create another tab. In fact, we'll have 3 tabs. There we go. And I can click in and obviously change the label of my tab. So what we're going to have is we'll just have person, and in here we'll have address, just in case we're going to ship something to these people. And I'm going to have another one called spend. so we can see how much we're going to spend on each one. And we can also set an icon for these tabs. So that can come from my computer, from SharePoint, wherever those icons are stored. So I can go through and select a file. So we've got one here called Santa that I can go through and set. So obviously we could have a different icon depending on what kind of information is going to be on each tab within there. So I think I had a few, but I can't remember what I called them. So I'm just going to set them all to Santa here, or Father Christmas as we call him in the UK. So there's the three tabs. Now, in order to position each of the controls under those tabs, it's just a case of dragging and dropping them. So I can drag the last name field in, the first name, the full name, the email address we could drop in there as well. Maybe we don't actually need company, so I can go through, select that one, and remove it. There we go. Job title I don't really need. Business phone, that can go as well. We'll drag home phone up though into the tab. So that's in that first tab, as well as mobile number. Hopefully we don't need fax number, we can get rid of that. And then we're onto the address tab. So now I can start dragging those address fields into the address tab. So we've got all of those. I don't need web page. We could put notes under spend, so we'll drag that up there. And then we've also got the relationship type stuff, which actually I will put that under the person field, or under the person tab. So we'll drag those in there. And then finally, that total spend, I'll put under the spend tab. And I'm going to remove attachments. Don't need that right now. Okay, so we've got a better layout already. So we can fill out the main fields that we require in a person, address details we can add, and like I said, we've got the spend stuff off to the right. So really quick and easy to provide that sort of thing. So also on the Rich Forms tab, we've got the ability to add our own buttons and actions and so on, which is the next thing. So I'm going to do away with the standard save and cancel button and just add my own button on here. So they can be in the form of links or buttons, depending on how you want that to look. So I'll create a button with actions. And in here, we can obviously change the label of the button, but I can start to get this to do something. So in here, we've got the first title, and this is actually just going to save the form. So I'm going to go through, and here's a list of actions that I can perform. So I'm going to choose the one that says save form. That's it. It's going to save it. Then the next action that I can do is going to email the person, whatever we want to call it, the recipient of the gift. So I'll have that as the title, and then in the type of action, I'm going to come down here to send mail. Okay, now under the send mail, we can say who it's going to be sent from. So don't need to write any code here. Who it's going to be sent from is me, the person that's logged on. And the person that's logged on, we can go and get from this contextual objects section. So as I expand the context objects and go to user, I can see the email address for the current user. So I'll double click that. And that's it. So user.email will provide me with that, but I didn't need to remember it. I can just go through and look it up from the context objects section. So that's who the email is coming from. Who the email is going to is going to be whoever is inside that email address on the form. So here's all the fields from that contact list on the form. So there's the email address. So just double click that. So it drops in the name of that field, and that's who it's going to be sent to. We could carbon copy and blind carbon copy people, and in the subject we could put in your gift, and we'll just say hi, and let's drop in the first name wherever first name is. So I can see last name, there's first name, so I'll drop in the first name. I bought you a gift, so you better buy me one, and so on. So we can design our message however we want that to appear. That can just be sent as text or rich text, however you want it to be displayed. So that's going to be the email that gets sent out, and then we could add another action, just telling the user maybe that this was successfully submitted. So we'll just have that saying submitted, and in the type here, I'm going to come down to show message, and that message can take various forms. So I'm going to use a status message, which is success, which means it's going to be a green graded banner, and we'll just say well done, you submitted an item. Okay, and we could set the title for that as success and maybe have it display for 10 seconds or something like this. Okay, so they're the steps that I want my button to take. There are, of course, lots of different actions that you could do. We can get this to add list items somewhere else. So if there's another list in another site or in this current site, if we just select one as an example, the wish list, I could map the fields from this form to that form, or just go through and set hard-coded values, whatever I want to do, so I can build list items in other lists as well. We've got delete list item. You can actually execute script. So although I said this is a no-code tool, you can write code if you want to, but you don't normally have to, but you do have that ability. We can do HTTP requests, so we can reach out to the Graph API or anything like that. We can open up other forms. So maybe as a result of completing this form, you're taken to another form, depending on what you fill out. So that would be something that you could also do. Along with lots of other actions, including starting workflows. You can actually call a flow as well from here. We can set a field value on the form and so on and so forth. Hopefully you get the idea of the abilities here. So there's the three actions that we added. So save form, email the person, and give them a message to say it's submitted. So I'll hit save on that one. Double click on my label so I can give it a title. So I just change the label of that to submit. Okay, at that point, I'm going to hit save. Just because if I do something wrong, you probably don't want to watch me do all of that again. So that's saved, and we can just have a quick go with it. So when I hit new item, here's our new form. So we can drop my wife Sarah in here. Notice this full name column, so it's really annoying in a contact list. You have to fill that out. So we could put in her email address and so on. I'm not going to put a phone on, but yeah, we've got all of those details. We've got the address details that we could fill out. Spend, I want to calculate this in a moment, so we could just hit submit at that point, and there we go. We've got our item done. So it says success, well done, you submitted an item. So that's my my custom button working there as well. And the last action I could have actually got that to do is to actually close the form, which I didn't do, but yeah, there is an action that would allow me to do that. So I'll just hit cancel for now. Okay, so back to the designer. So we'll launch the designer from the ribbon this time. Okay, so we're back on the onto the form design, and on that rich forms tab. What I'm going to do now is actually go through and embed the wish list. So the wish list is here. If I just right click that and open up a new tab, you can see this is just a bog standard list as well. It's just got a few fields in it. It started off as the custom list template. So it has a title. It's got a lookup to person. So notice Sarah Lonsdale is showing in here at the moment. And then we've got the price, the quantity, the total, the tax, and the grand total, which we're going to populate with some calculations. So I want to embed that on here. So below my submit button, perhaps we can go through and insert a sublist. And notice on the drop down, it's got the wish list. That's the only list that contains a lookup to my Christmas list, which is why it's the only one showing here. So I'll select it and just sit back and wait. So my hands are off the mouse. This is Lightning Forms doing all of this. It's going through adding the wish list list view web part onto the page. It's building connections for me and everything, and we're done. So now I've got that embedded on the form as well. So I can now start to fill out the person details and then the gifts that I'm going to give that person all in one go. So again, I'll just hit save and close on that one. And so I can click onto new item again. Okay, so we've got myself in here. So I'll put me in. There we go. Just remember my details, and we can start filling this out. So so I'd like some whiskey, and I've got to figure all this stuff out. So if I said it is a £100 bottle of whiskey, and there's one of those, that's going to make that 100, but maybe there's £20 tax on it, that's 120. So I had to figure all of that out myself. But notice I can start adding other things as well. So I'd also like chocolates, which are maybe £10. Probably gone wrong there. Sorry, that's 10. There we go. All right. So so when we save that, those items are actually written out to the wish list. So notice here we can go into that wish list, and there's the whiskey and chocolates that we just added. So we're displaying one form but collecting information in multiple forms, in multiple lists. So now I just need to get all of those calculations to figure themselves out. So as I go back into the custom new form, we can start to work with the calculations and the actual logic that's going to go into these forms. But just before I do that, I'll just quickly highlight some of the other things on here. So we can go through and do things like lock or unlock the contents of some of these fields. I can move them up and down. I can do that with drag and drop or whatever. I can also change how the labels are displayed and that sort of thing. So if we wanted to change those, that's quite useful to do. And you can also set all the height, width, padding, and so on, which you can also do just simply by grabbing the handles on each field and adjusting the size and so on. So that's just some of the things that you can do on there. Now on the behavior tab, let me just zoom out a little bit. There we go. So on the behavior tab, we have got the control status here. So we've got whether the control is enabled or not, and whether it is visible or not. So this is useful for things like buttons. I can take a button, and maybe the button, you can't click it, you can see it, but you can't click it, depending on what SharePoint group you're in. So if you're an approver, for example, you could approve an item. We could also hide something completely. So I'm going to go to this spend tab here, and just in case somebody accidentally comes into this list, I don't want them to see what I'm going to be spending on my wife. So what I could do is go into this visible field here, click onto the function wizard, and choose what the condition is for that field to be hidden. So in the context objects again, as we scroll down, and if we go under user, I have this nice little function here that says is member of group. Now that's not the only condition that I could use for this purpose. It's a condition. I could hide this field based on the previous field being set to whatever. But I'm going to just use the name of a group. Now the cool thing is I can actually test this. So if I just get rid of that function for a moment, let's just delete that. I also don't have to keep saving and testing as I have been doing when I'm building out these functions. I can just simply click onto test and test my forms logic. So notice there we've got the total spend field is being displayed. As I double click on this function, we'll put in the name of a group. So actually there isn't a group just called owners, which is fine. So sorry, let me just cancel that out. So when I hit test here, let's just give that a go. So that group doesn't actually exist. So it's effectively true. Therefore, the spend field is hidden. You can't see it. So if I was a member of a group called owners, you would see that spend field and so on. So that's really straightforward to go through and add that kind of logic onto your forms. So we've also got the initial and calculated values. So that'd be quite useful to work with that on this full name field. So I can take the full name, make this calculated. So I just actually want to take the first name. Let's change this to assignment. So we basically want first name plus last name, which is title. There we go. So we can drop that in. And notice that I got the syntax checking as well there. So if I forget that I'm not writing code or something, I'll start putting semicolons on or whatever, it's actually going to tell me you've made a mistake there. You don't need that semicolon. So I can go through and get rid of that. If I just end with a full stop. So any kind of syntax error that you make, it's going to flag that up for you, which is useful. So we've got a simple calculation here. Now I can also do field validation. So if you're spending too much, maybe we could highlight that to yourself. So you can add validation, set the validation text, you can make things required and so on. But I want to concentrate on some more meaty stuff like the sublist column. So the sublist column is grayed out at the moment. When I go in and click into a sublist, so now I'm inside the total field of my sublist, I can go into the calculated property for that, and I can start to work with the sublist current row. So as I expand the current row, I can now build my calculation out. So I want the price multiplied by the quantity. So very simple calculation, but that's going to be working out my total field. And then if I go across to the tax, we can add a calculation for that as well. So the tax is going to be from the current row again. It's going to be the total, and I'm just going to hard code this to 0.2. So we'll save that one, and then we've got the grand total. So I can what am I doing here? So I'm taking the total plus the tax. So very straightforward. So let's just give that one quick go. So I'll save and close this again. Okay, I see Sandy UC has joined, so we'll put Sandy in here. So we can see the full name field is populated. She is non-family, she's a colleague, and a friend. And we'll put in some SharePoint socks. She's always wanted some of those. So we can drop in our price in here, and we're having just one pair, and we've got everything else being worked out for us, which is great. Okay, so just a couple of things to finish this off. We'll go back to the Christmas list, and under the list ribbon again, we'll launch the designer for the new form. Okay, and what I want to do now is take the value of anything related to this master list item. I want to take those values from the grand total column and put it back up into this spend column so I can see the total spend that I'm spending on any person. So as I go into the spend tab, let's click onto this total spend here, and on the behavior tab, we can build a calculation. So we're going back to this calculated property. And this time, we're not using sublist current row. In fact, that's out of context, so it's not displaying, but we can go through sublists, and there's the sublist called wish list. So I can expand that, and here's my grand total field. So as I expand the grand total field, I've got some aggregate functions that I can work with. So sum, average, count, min, max. I want to take the sum, and that's it. That's all I need to do is double click onto that, and we'll be calculating out that total spend. So we'll just do one other change on here, and then we'll test that finally. So the other change I'm going to do is go back to the person field, and I want to build a cascading lookup. So this is where I can take the relationship type and the relationship. Now currently everything's showing, we're seeing every single type of relationship regardless as to whether it's family or not. So all I'm going to do here is select this relationship field, and I'm going to pass a filter to it. And to show you how this is going to work, as I right click on my relationship lookup list, I've basically just got a simple mapping list here. So you can see family is made up of wife, husband, son, daughter, mother, father, and then we've got non-family is colleague, friend, enemy. So all I'm going to do there is look up, or I am already looking up from this column here, but I'm going to filter based on my title column. So as we go back, we'll take the relationship, click onto the filter, add a condition. So we're going to take the title is equals to the form input, and so that could be a hard-coded value or an expression. So it's form input that I'm going to base it on, and I'm going to base it on the relationship type, and that's it. So I'll just hit save there, and let's give that one final test run. So again, I'll click onto to new item, and let's add Carter. So Jared. We'll drop his details in there, and we'll put non-family, and notice that we've just got colleague, friend, or enemy, and so on. So really straightforward to go through and do that. And Jared, I don't know, might like a radio controlled car. I'll set that to 100, and he wants one of them. So we're calculating all of our fields. Let's just add one other one. He likes beer. Lots of beer. So we've added that. And now if we go to our spend tab, we can see the total spend that we're going to spend on Jared, and so on. Okay, so that's hopefully giving you a sort of overview of the type of thing that you can do. And although it is a little fun exercise, there's all sorts of types of forms that you could build or with Lightning Forms. So yeah, maybe expense solutions or human resource solutions, and all sorts of things using this. And if you wanted to run anything by us as to what sort of thing could be built, we'll be able to help you with that. So really straightforward to use. Hopefully you've been able to appreciate just how easy it is to build your forms. Like I said, there's lots of things that you could create, so you can work with those existing external list forms as well, and maybe build things like expense reporting, asset registers, vacation request forms, and so on. All of these are capable things. So at that point, I'm going to leave this slide up on the page so you've got my contact details if you have any questions or if you want to download a trial of Lightning Forms. But I'm also going to open up for a Q&A. So if you want to ask any questions now, what you can do is raise your hand using the GoToWebinar software, and I can unmute you and you can feel free to ask your question. If you don't want to, that's fine. Just drop me an email on brett@lightningtools.com and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have there. Also, this was recorded. It will be posted up on our site later on today, so you can go back and watch it or share it with colleagues if you want to. And yeah, if there's any questions that they have, also feel free to reach out to us. Okay, so again, if you've got any questions, feel free to raise your hand here. So yeah, looks like we've got a raised hand from Nikki, Nikki Green from Rico. So Nikki, I think you may have dialed in. It's not allowing me to unmute you for some reason. I'm not sure if you're using computer audio or not. So Nikki, if you have a question now, feel free to drop it on an email, and I'll be happy to answer that now if you get that across to me here. But otherwise, yep, looks like there's no other questions. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for attending. Next week we also have some additional webinars. So we've launched recently our SPFX client-side web part. So we've got our brand new Lightning Conductor, which is a content roll-up tool. We've also got our data viewer and also a discussion forum tool, Social Squared. So these are not new products, but they are completely recreated, a lot easier to use than they have been before, and you'll be able to see those next week on the webinars. So thank you everybody for attending.